Good morning, everybody. It's Science Week, and you are most welcome along to day 2 of the Teagasc Festival of Farming and Food, which is running right through until Friday. My name is Damien O'Reilly, and I'm your host between now and 12 o'clock. And it's great to see so many participants once again today. Yesterday, we were in the Botanic Gardens in Grassland in Dublin, and today we've moved down the coast to the sunny southeast, to the Johnstown Castle Estate in County Wexford, which is home, of course, to the Teagasc Crops, Environment and Land Use Research Centre. And today, the title of our webinar is Soil Health is Our Wealth. It's a great title, and we're going to find out a little bit more about all of that between now and midday. A little bit later on, we will have some of the great people that are working down there in Johnstown to share with us their idea of why soil health is our wealth. We're going to be playing a video very shortly as well to give you an idea of the work that happens down in the beautiful Johnstown Castle Estate. Now, you can get involved as well, and we are delighted that all of these events this week, they're free for you, thanks to Teagasc and Science Foundation Ireland. But you can also get involved in terms of asking questions or making points by using the hashtag on Twitter, hashtag FestFarmFood, but also at the bottom of this Zoom meeting here, there is a Q&A function, so if you have any questions as we go along, we will certainly try and get to them over the next hour or so. And if we don't get to them, we will certainly do our best to try and answer your questions privately as well. And our team of experts are more than happy to share their expertise with you. Now, we will also be emailing you a little bit later on, looking for your feedback. So please do help us. Maybe tell us how good or maybe how bad I was and how good everybody else was by answering that a little bit later on. All right, well, we have been down to Johnstown to film what's going on there. And as I said, a little bit later on, we will be going live to the experts. Some of them you're going to actually see now in this video. So for the next 20 minutes or so, sit back and have a look at this wonderful video that we're going to bring to you right now.
Did you know that soils are the basis of all of the food that you eat? They also provide a range of other services such as purifying water, storing carbon from our atmosphere, and providing a home for biodiversity. They also support all of the buildings and homes that we have on the planet. Here at Teagasc Johnstown Castle, we've been working on soil science for the past 50 years. The initial focus was how to improve our soils to increase food production after World War II. Our focus has now changed to more sustainable food production systems. In our centre, we have a range of scientists working on different themes such as biodiversity, carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas emissions, water quality, and on soil science itself. Our research here focuses on soil health and its importance in both underpinning sustainability and producing food. In this video, our scientists will give you an overview of the various research projects that they're carrying out on this very important topic.
Historically, healthy, fertile soils have been the main reason behind the rise of civilizations. We had the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, the Indo-Valley, the Incas, and many more. But likewise, soil degradation has also been the trigger for the collapse of societies. We have the example of the Greeks after centuries of soil erosion. Also, more recent disasters. For instance, the Dust Bowl in the 30s, with massive dust storms due to wind erosion of bare soils. This was after just a decade of overfarming, deep plowing, and loss of organic matter. These poor soil management practices ended up causing enormous economic and agricultural damage. Human well-being relies on healthy, non-degraded soils. To put this in context, soil degradation is globally responsible for the loss of 12 million hectares of productive, fertile agricultural land. This is more than the area of the whole of Ireland being lost every year. So it's important to treat soils as valuable resources and manage them sustainably for future generations. Healthy soils can be defined as multifunctional living systems with a continued capacity to sustain plant, animal, and human life. Only living things can have health, so it's important to see soils as living and diverse ecosystems, full of life. Soils are multifunctional. They produce 95% of all the food and fiber for humans and livestock, but they also provide other important services for society. They regulate climate by capturing CO2 through plant photosynthesis and keeping that carbon in the ground as soil organic matter. Soils are the place on Earth with the highest biodiversity, and they are the source of many useful chemicals and medicines. There are more living organisms in a handful of healthy topsoil than all the humans who have ever existed on Earth. Soil microorganisms also recycle our waste byproducts from food production into useful nutrients for plants. And healthy soils also purify water and minimize the risk of flooding downstream in our towns and cities. There are many different types of soils, each one with a different ability to carry out these functions. Here in Ireland, our main issues with soil degradation are compaction, mainly from farm machinery, loss of nutrients contaminating our water streams, and erosion. Society needs to better understand the practices that lead to soil degradation, and also those that can heal and improve our soils. That's what we are here for at Teagasc.
Hello, I'm Guy Lagrange. I'm a third-year PhD student here in Johnstown Castle, and I'm working on plant biodiversity in Grassland. I'm going to talk to you today about the productivity function of the soil, illustrated by these animals here that produce milk to feed the humans.
Can you imagine growing vegetables, barley or wheat without soil? It is actually the same for the grass. The grass needs good soil for growing. What is a good soil? A good soil would be a soil providing them in nutrients and also that can hold the water. So with good water retention, you can balance the periods without rain or with too much rain.
The best experts we have today to take care of our soil are farmers. Every day they take decisions to keep the soil fertility high. This way, they are sure they will have good grass to feed their animals, and so they can sell good milk or good meats for everybody to eat well. But the climate is changing. We expect less rain in summer, more rain in winter, and there are concerns raised about the use of fertilizer that could produce greenhouse gases. To answer these questions, then we are trying to develop here in Johnstown a grasslands that could cope with that, so cope with less fertilizer and less rain in the summer. We are testing the ability of multi-species swards to cope with droughts and also with reduced fertilizer use. To do so, we mix grass, herbs, and legumes like clover, and so interacting together, they can benefit to each other and maintain good productivity with low inputs. Clover, for example, can increase soil fertility, and other species like herbs have long roots that can bring carbon deeper into the soil. We will now see why carbon storage is an important thing.
Hi, my name is James Rambo, and I am the soil carbon sequestration technician here in Johnstown Castle. The great environmental challenge of this century is the need to stabilize atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases. In order to achieve this, we, the caretakers of this planet, need to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and find ways of removing greenhouse gases from our atmosphere.
The scope of the issue we face is very challenging. Currently, sources of greenhouse gas emissions from human-related activities release 34 gigatons of CO2 into the atmosphere annually. At present, there is no hope for a radical reversal of these rates of emission. Aside from reducing our fossil fuel use, there is one method we can all use to try and stem the rate of greenhouse gas growth. This involves the sequestration or capture of atmospheric CO2 as organic carbon in our soils. Carbon stored in soils is very beneficial. It improves their structure, their water holding capacity, their productivity, and their biodiversity. Europe's recent Green Deal aims to prevent climate change by bringing down carbon emissions significantly by 2050. Beef and dairy production are the largest Irish agricultural industries and the main cause of the sector's emissions. Reducing the national herd's carbon emissions as much as possible while feeding a growing population is going to be very challenging. Here at Teagasc Johnstown Castle, we use a range of equipment to monitor and track CO2 and soil carbon. such as medicovariance towers, elemental analyzers, and pneumatic soil corers. These enable researchers to look into improving the national herd's carbon footprint. The main strategies being investigated in order to achieve this include improving efficiencies, adopting low-emission technologies, and carbon sequestration.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you briefly about what exactly soil carbon sequestration is and how it happens. So we have our plants, which, as we all know, photosynthesize. They use solar energy combined with carbon dioxide, which is our big problem word at the minute, and water to create simple sugars such as carbohydrates. So they use these simple sugars to grow biomass. This biomass is above and below the soil. Now, following decomposition, it eventually becomes a stable form of carbon in the soil. I just demonstrate here 3 types of sod that I have, one from a woodland, one from a long-term grassland, and one from a tillage soil. So we see here with the woodland, which has been woodland for 20 plus years, we have deep roots, which go right to the bottom of the sod. You can see it's very stable. It's in one piece. The water is well held within the soil. There is ample pore space for water to move through, but not enough pore space for water to wash away the soil. Here we have our grassland, which again has been grassland for 10 years plus. You can see it's much shallower. There's quite a dense biomass on the top here. They're quite deep rooted, not as deep as the woodland, but it holds firm together. It's well structured. Again, another very good method to sequester carbon. And then we have our tillage. And the tillage, as you can see, it's very crumbly. It doesn't really hold its structure too well. There's not really a great root mass. Very compared to the woodland, there's very little biodiversity in the soil. However, this is the sod that has the most potential to sequester carbon. With careful management, such as minimum tillage, or we're looking into very deep ploughing, etc., there is an awful lot more potential to sequester carbon long-term in tillage soils.
Okay, so when we hear carbon dioxide, the majority of us think of it as being a bad gas, but in actual fact, it's a normal constituent of the atmosphere. The issue is when there's too much carbon dioxide. So I have set up a little bit of an experiment here just to demonstrate exactly what happens when there's too much carbon dioxide present in the atmosphere. So we have a little temperature sensor here that's reading 19.2 degrees at the minute. Both these bottles have distilled water and are filled with ambient air. So they have normal levels of carbon dioxide in them. I have 2 effervescent tablets here that I'm going to drop into one, which will release carbon dioxide. I will close the lid on both and then add a heat source. And normally what we should see is an increase in temperature over the standard in the carbon dioxide bottle versus what is normal ambient air. So I've just dropped the effervescent tablets in. You can see it's starting to fizz now. I'm just going to place the lid on top and let the carbon dioxide build up inside the bottle. Okay, so I'm removing our thermometer, adding the lid to our control, flicking on our heat source, and placing it in front. So now, in theory, our carbon dioxide bottle should heat up faster and to a higher temperature than our control. The lamp here actually represents the sun, which was both a light and heat source, and the 2 bottles represent our atmosphere under normal conditions and under exaggerated carbon dioxide conditions. Okay, so we've left the experiment overnight. It's actually got a bit cooler in here. The heating's been off, obviously. So this is our control. We are now just about 17.5 degrees Celsius in our control. And if we look at our CO2 bottle, then we are up around 26.7 degrees or so. That just goes to show a temperature difference of 10 degrees Celsius. And that's just here in the lab in front of us. That's what's happening in our atmosphere at the minute when we are emitting such amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere.
Hi, my name is Ian Kavanagh, and I'm going to be talking to you today about the importance of soil and its role in nutrient recycling. Irish agriculture, be it animal or crop production, produces a lot of organic residues in the form of animal slurry or incorporated into bedding to create farmyard manure. However, other byproducts, such as food processing, waste management, and industrial residues, also have to be dealt with. The incorporation of these organic residues into the soil is one such method to reduce the organic residues from animal farming and food production. These organic residues are a good source of organic matter, carbon, and nutrients in the form of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. These feed soil biodiversity and help sustain healthy crop production. This is of vital importance as this nutrient recycling helps close the carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus loop and promote the farm-to-fork cycle, while also helping to reduce the use of artificial chemical fertilizers. With this in mind, Teagasc is running a number of experiments and field trials to assess the impact of these residues and the best way to utilize the nutrients available in the soil. Trials such as the EU-funded project Nitri2 Cycle is investigating new bio-based fertilizers for their efficacy in grassland and arable crops. They also examine their benefits to soil health, such as increasing soil organic carbon. Other field experiments have also looked at acidified and amended cattle slurry and its utilization and incorporation into the soil. However, none of these residues would be utilizable if it wasn't for the wide variety of microorganisms that call the soil home.
Hi, my name is Aoife Duff. I'm a soil microbiologist here in Teagasc, and today I'd like to talk to you about soil biodiversity and how it contributes to soil health. As you've already heard, carbon sequestration, nutrient cycling, and all of the processes mentioned so far are very important for soil health. But what makes these processes happen in the soil? Well, some of the processes take place via chemical reactions, but the majority of the processes are driven by what we call microorganisms. In fact, in 1 teaspoon of soil, you can find millions of species of microbes, and together it contains billions of microorganisms. So essentially, the soil is teeming with life. So here in Teagasc, we are doing lots of projects to work on soil biodiversity. Paula Roja is our technician. What are you working on, Paula?
I'm working in how the soil microbial community can divert the agricultural greenhouse gas emissions coming from the soil.
You may ask me, how can you tell how many microorganisms are in the soil? Well, not too long ago, the only way of identifying a species and discovering what they did was to grow them on lab media. Media is a combination of different elements like carbon and nitrogen, which the microbes require in order to grow. The problem with this method was all microbes may not eat the exact same food or elements, and so the scientists discovered they were only growing about 1% of the microbes present in the soil. Microbiologists started to find a new way of looking at microbes in the soil.
Hi, my name is Circa Kelly. I'm a PhD student here in Teagasc Johnstown Castle. My project looks at how soil microorganisms make nutrients available from soil organic matter in order to help plants to grow. Today, I'm going to show you how we extract microbial DNA from soil.
Circa Kelly is demonstrating a DNA extraction. Here she uses a fast prep machine to vortex or shake the beads in the tube and chemically and mechanically burst open the cells to release their genetic code.
Hi, my name is Kerry Ryan. I am a PhD student and I study microbes in the soil. I'm particularly interested in how mixed species grasslands affect what kind of microbes we find in the soil, how they work, and how they are affected by drought. Today, we're going to look at how DNA can be separated through gel electrophoresis.
Kerry Ryan then carries out a gel electrophoresis so that we can visualize the DNA. Finally, with a combination of different techniques and sequencing technology, we were able to read their genetic code, which told us all of the genetic information of each species of microbe. So this is just a taster of the world of microbiology and soil biodiversity in Teagasc. We hope that our projects will help farmers employ the best management techniques possible to keep the soil biodiversity balanced. This in turn will keep the soils healthy in order to carry out vital functions that will help the farmer and the environment.
Hi, my name is Damien and I'm a soil scientist in the Agriculture Catchments program. So as you have heard by now, soil has many different functions. One of them is the provision and supply of clean water. Only 3% of Earth's water is fresh water, and we can only access and use a tiny fraction of that fresh water. Imagine that this tank contains all the water on Earth, and this little bottle would be all the fresh water on Earth. And then this tiny little teaspoon is all the water, fresh water we can access for drinking and other purposes. The amount of this water is shrinking every day as a consequence of things like climate change and water pollution. Fresh water supply is continually collected, purified, and distributed in the natural water cycle with the help of soils. Soils are Earth's largest natural filter, and capturing water is one of the most important roles that soils play in our ecosystem. Soils capture water through their pores. Pores can be any size, from small microscopic holes to large worm-like holes and mice tunnels. The size of soil pores is determined by soil texture, which is a ratio of different soil particles such as sand, silt, and clay. These particles stick together with the help of biological life and organic matter, which provide the glues to form tiny crumbs called aggregates. Aggregates are the building blocks of every soil, and they contain lots of pores and cracks. Aggregates form soil structure, which increases the ability of soil to capture and hold water. However, the ability of soil to capture and purify water is limited, as I will show you now by pouring this dirty water onto 3 different types of soil. Sandy soils have many large pores. While they're good at capturing water, water moves quickly through them. This does not allow soil enough time to fully purify on its way downwards to groundwater. Loamy soils have both large and small pores. While water moves through them quickly, some of that water is also filtered. Clayey soils are sticky and have lots of small pores. They're very good at purifying and holding water, but they're slow to capture water. Water that is not captured by soil runs off the soil surface until it reaches a nearby source of surface water, such as stream, river, or lake. This water can also cause floods during heavy rainfall events. The runoff water also picks up soil particles with all the nutrients and chemicals attached to them, transporting and depositing them into receiving waters. This has a very harmful effect on aquatic plants and animals. Healthy soils are full of life and have good structure and organic matter content. Because of that, they have lots of big and small pores. Therefore, it's important to minimize the disturbance of soils. Frequent tillage or compaction by heavy machinery destroys soil structure. These soils will only have small pores. Land surface cover is also important. Healthy soils covered by plants are most efficient at capturing water. Plant roots keep the soil together. Dead roots provide soil organic matter, and together they make the soil resistant to erosion and better at capturing water. The above-ground biomass, like trees and plants, reduces the devastating impact of rain and slows down the flow of runoff water. It is also important not to fertilize soils more than is needed by plants, especially with nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizers, or to spray them too much with chemicals such as pesticides and herbicides. This is because excess fertilizer and chemicals can enter and contaminate the groundwater or can be washed off the surface, polluting our streams, rivers, lakes, and seas. Remember this teaspoon of water. So how do we prevent it from shrinking in future? One of the answers is to keep our soils healthy.
Hello, my name is Lillian O'Sullivan. I'm a research officer here in Teagasc, where my work focuses on sustainable soils and land use. So now you have seen an overview of the different soil functions. We know that soil functions are critical to sustain life on Earth, and my work focuses more specifically on how these soil functions work together at larger scales. It is important that we manage the system sustainably to maintain soil health, to guarantee the delivery of these critical soil functions into the future. So how can we support this through our research? Process knowledge can explain how each soil function works, and each soil function is a very complex process in its own right. For example, the process of cleaning and purifying water as it moves through the soil matrix, as Augie showed you earlier, or how the soil accumulates and stores organic matter, which is really important for climate regulation, as shown by James. Understanding these processes helps us to explain how much a particular soil in its environment interacting with management can deliver a soil function. Recently, as part of an EU-funded project, Landmark, we developed the Soil Navigator, which is a decision support tool that can help farmers and advisors optimize their soil functions together. So essentially, you input some data and you ask it to assess your soil functions, and then it allows you to optimize based upon your requirements. So if I have an issue with water quality, I will ask the Soil Navigator to optimize in favor of that soil function. One resource I often use is our Irish Soil Information System. It's a fully interactive map. Anybody can go online and learn more about the extent and distribution of the different soil types that we have or in your own area. Here in Johnstown Castle, we aim to generate science that can support sustainable land management. And remember, caring for soils is caring for life.
Well, that was really a fascinating take on what's going on there in Johnstown. And thanks to all the staff there for their courtesy in showing us what is going on there. And some of the stars of that video are now joining us. So you can switch on your cams, guys, now that you've the makeup on and all of that. Good morning to you all. And we're going to chat to you now. And remember, for the participants, the many of you that are out there all over the country and indeed across the world, we do know that we have some international observers at our webinar today. Feel free to send some questions through, and we will try to get to them. If we don't get to them on the webinar, our experts will definitely do their best to try and respond to you individually or indeed in the actual chat. So we're going to have a little chat now, as I said, with some of the people involved there, some of the students and staff there at Johnstown. And we have with us Aoife Duff, who's a soils technologist who works in soil microbiology, and you saw Aoife on the video there. We also have Luis Lopez Sangil, who's a soils research technologist who is also there. We have Gillian Grange, a Teagasc Walsh scholar and a PhD student. We have Augie Zurovich, is a soils scientist, and James Rambo is a soil carbon sequestration technician. It's really like with all those names, it's like a meeting at the UN there. Guys, this morning, but it's great to have you all. Aoife, can I begin with you? How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you keeping yourself?
I'm great. It's good to see it. Good to see you there, Aoife, and thanks for your giving us the time in the video there. I'm really interested. I mean, it's some amazing facts outlined, and it's really wonderful work and very important work in this time of climate chaos that you're doing down there in Johnstown. But I'm just looking at the role of scientists and farmers in working towards a more healthy soil microbiome. How is that? How can we ensure that we can maybe do a bit more sequestration and have a more healthy soil microbiome?
Yeah, so essentially that's what we were trying to find out in Teagasc. We want to investigate microbes under different environmental factors and see how they respond. But so far we found that compaction, erosion of the soil, unbalanced fertilization, and avoiding over-fertilizing the land all decreases the diversity of the below-ground community or the soil microbiome. So things like adding organic matter and keeping plants and living roots in the soil will all help prevent the erosion of the soil, and it will allow the diversity to increase. And also, if you have a high diversity of plants, as Gillian has shown, that this will also hopefully increase the microbial diversity as well.
Are there such things as good and bad microorganisms found in the soil, Aoife?
Yeah, so you can have bad microorganisms, which are called pathogens, that cause plants and human or animal diseases. But there's also the majority of the microbes you find in the soil are beneficial. So the main message again is high diversity will more likely keep those pathogens numbers low. But also plants, most plant species have a natural resistance to the pathogenic infections. So disease outbreaks can be controlled by, like, say, pesticides and that, but hopefully we'll start moving towards more biocontrols.
Yeah, and I think certainly the EU Farm to Fork Green Deal project over the next 10 years, which aims to reduce the amount of fertilizer use and pesticide use, will probably will be good for the soil, Aoife, yeah?
Definitely, yeah. It'll all contribute to the diversity of the microbes and the health of the soil.
Right. Just one other question to you, going back to my first question. How invested are farmers in all of this, in quality soil, multi-species swards and all of that? Is this something that's becoming more of a priority, do you find, from your interaction with them?
So in Teagasc, that's what we're definitely trying to investigate and hopefully promote. So farmers, I think, are taking it on board, but they do need convincing. Obviously they want to make money. So we want to prove to them that this can be done and can be done sustainably, and it can make a profit for the farmers.
Yeah. Well, that's the title of our discussion this morning. Soil health is our wealth, and if farmers can get that into their minds, certainly it'll be good for us all. I just want to stay with us there, Aoife. I'm going to move on now to Luis Lopez Sangil. Luis, good morning to you.
Hello, good morning. I think I have a problem with my video. Sorry for that. Yeah.
That's such a pity. We'd love to see your pretty face, but we can listen to your voice. Luis, with a name like that, I suppose the first question I have to get out of the way, where are you from?
Spain, as you can notice from my accent.
Yeah, we remember Manuel and Fawlty Towers, all right. There's a bit of a similarity there. You're too young to remember that. But anyway, listen, it was really, as I said to Aoife there, fascinating video and wonderful work that's going on down there in the sunny southeast. Can you tell me about any soil disaster that has affected or is still affecting humans in more recent times? Because I really was, and I'm using that word again, fascinated to discover. I think it might have been you that was saying it, Luis, like in a handful of soil, the millions and millions of living things that are actually there, and the story behind a handful of soil. So it is really important to us. But have there been any disasters, going back, that we saw them going back in history there? But what about in more recent times?
So globally, I would probably pick like soil erosion. Erosion is at the moment the silent killer of soils, I would say, globally, because it's a bit difficult to pick up this with the naked eye for normal people, right? So you think that at the moment we are losing globally like 24 billion of fertile topsoil into our rivers and seas. That's a lot of soil that is being washed away. Soils, fertile soils, and nutrients as well, right? So this is very bad. This is something that could be say like catastrophic if you think. It takes like 500 years to form only 1 inch of topsoil in normal average agricultural conditions, right? So it takes a lot of time to form. I've been in places in croplands in the Mediterranean, and also here in slopey areas, that you can see even more than 1 inch of soil is been literally washed away during heavy rainfall, heavy rainfalls after only a few years, really. So if you can see, like, when you see all those brown rivers and streams with this brown color of soil being washed away with not only soil but the nutrients, it's something that it's very bad. It really hurts my soul, really. So
Yeah.
it looks like, for me, in many areas, we are repeating the same history of Greeks, really.
Yeah, that is very interesting. You know, something that takes 500 years to mature in 5 minutes can disappear. So Luis, what obviously you're saying heavy rainfall, it's climate that is having that impact. So how can we kind of arrest or redress the situation?
Probably best thing, or one of the first solutions, would be not to leave soils naked without a plant cover. It's a main issue that we are having at the moment in many areas in which after croplands, especially in croplands, we leave the soils naked, and then a heavy rainfall comes and it literally washes away the soil. So there are no roots in there that can hold on to those soil particles. And then it's been, if you do that years after years after years, you are literally losing inches of soil away. So there are in some areas actually in which there have been studies calculating the rate of soil loss, and it has been like calculated that we are only having like 50, 100, less than 100 actually years of crops if we are not keeping that soil. So definitely not leaving the soils naked, having cover crops, catch up crops that can hold on the soils. That would be a good point, especially in places in here in Ireland where there is a lot of rain.
Yeah. Okay. And that brings me nicely on to Ghislain Grange in terms of Ireland, and specifically when you talk there, Luis, about not leaving the soil naked and about cover crops. Of course, the most prominent cover crop, you could call it, that we have in this country is grassland, is pasture all over the country. So Ghislain, when it comes to grass production, which was featured a lot in that video, what else can we get from the soil? Calling Ghislain, maybe unmute. Hi, how are you?
Yeah, fine. Sorry.
Hello, France. So we're moving from Spain
yes.
to France. Am I right?
Completing the UN panel.
But just talking there about the importance of grassland pasture in Ireland. Good for the soil?
Yes. So of course, like as a French, I can say that we are all jealous of Irish grasslands because they are so green and they look so great. And it's actually a very good way to protect the soil health because it's always covered. So the raindrops cannot harm the soil, the bare soil, and the sunlight don't reach the soil neither. So it's good to keep good soil health. But of course, you cannot produce all what human needs from grasslands. And so that's why we have also crops. But soil is actually at the origin of much more than just our foods, because also the fiber that's, for example, I'm wearing a wool jumper today, and maybe you have a cotton shirt, and that's all derived from soil because everything grows on the soil. And also the forest grows on the soil. So this production function of the soil is also at the origin of the paper we write on. The newspaper we read is derived from soil. And even the fuel that we burn for having warm houses, like the turf is soil derived, the oil is soil derived, and very ancient, but of course it was plants growing from the soil. And so that's even the most renewable energy, the timber, is soil derived. So soil is at the origin of almost everything in our daily life. Even the plastic is derived from the petrol that is derived from the ancient plant growth. So we have to make sure to take very good care of our soils. And as citizens, the easy things that we can do is eating sustainable foods and making sure that we use renewable energies, all this kind of stuff. That's a good way to keep our soil healthy.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering if we go back to farming again, and the dominant form of farming in this country, as you know, Ghislain, is obviously livestock. What about organic manure? Obviously, cattle pooing on the grass where they're out 9 months of the year, and then we spread slurry as well. Is that what sort of an impact is that having on our soil?
So the best renewable farming is the one that is self-sufficient. So as Ian developed, then we can recycle nutrients, and so we can produce food from grasslands, and then the animals redeposit the manure or everything that is brought back to the soil and then bring nutrients back to the ground. And so that's a very good way to recycle nutrients and produce food in a very sustainable way. So in this way, the grasslands are very good. And the most organic manure you use, then the most sustainable it is. And the only point is, because we produce much food from the soil, then we have to bring some nutrients to this. So that's why sometimes fertilizer is used. And the problem is that fertilizer can lead to greenhouse gases emissions. So that's why we promote the use of clover, for example, that can bring the fertility to the soil, and by fixing some nutrients that they actually derive from the atmosphere. So it's for free and it's sustainable. So that's why we promote clover here in Johnston Castle, and the use of other species as well that have many other benefits. Like, for example, they promote pollinators coming to the fields and so on. So plant diversity in grasslands plays a very good role in soil health, but also in the whole ecosystem health.
All right, and just finally to yourself, Guylaine, because the question I put to Aoife earlier on, what is your assessment of farmers' interest in the soil now, and them realizing the importance of soil health for their good wealth?
Actually, farmers are citizens as well. And as everybody is getting aware that climate is changing, and actually farmers are at the front line when the climate is changing, because when you farm, then you rely on regular rainfalls, you rely on fertilizer price or this kind of stuff. That's all the climate change can bring much viability in it. So they are the first victims. And so they feel very concerned about this climate change. And so there is much interest in getting more sustainable production. And also there is ask from the consumers that ask constantly for more sustainable production. So like both on the markets wise and their own point of view, there is a much bigger growing interest from farmers about sustainability. And biodiversity is one part of the sustainability.
Okay, I'm going to move on. Do stay with us there, Guylaine. Very interesting there. We're moving on now to Augie. Augie, good morning to you.
Good morning, Damien. How are you?
I'm continuing with my UN line of questioning. So, what has brought you? Where have you come from to arrive in the wonderful county of Wexford?
Well, I was born and bred in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and one exciting thing about science is that you never know where your scientific pursuits will take you, and they took me to Ireland.
All right, no regrets?
No, not at all.
Yeah, you could be in worse places than down there in Johnstown. You mentioned that you're a scientist in the agricultural catchments program. Tell us a little bit more. What's that all about?
Okay, well, first thing for the viewers and who don't actually know what the catchments is. So the simple definition is that the catchment is an area in which water is collected by the natural landscape into a nearby body of water, such as river, lake, or ocean. So for example, imagine a valley surrounded by hills from each side. So this area acts like a natural funnel, and it captures water in that area. And imagine that hills are the edges of that catchment, and then all the rain falling on this area runs down the hill from higher points to be naturally collected by some larger body of water in the lower point of this area. And then the rain outside the edge of this catchment is falling on a different catchment and will flow into a different river or lake. So almost every inch of land is part of some catchment, and we all live in our local catchment. And a healthy catchment provides high quality drinking water and supports our activities such as agriculture, fishing, and, for example, water sports. And then healthy catchments also supports local ecosystems, so plants, animals, fish, and insects that depend on having healthy water thrive and flourish in such catchments. So what is our role? What is Teagasc's role in catchments research? So basically, Teagasc Agricultural Catchments Program is a research group of more than 20 scientists, technical staff, and advisors working in 6 different catchments located in different places across Ireland. And by agricultural catchments, we mean that the main land use in these catchments is agriculture. So our main objective, what we do, is to investigate links between intensive farming and water quality in these catchments. So for that, we use a variety of instruments and then scientific methods to monitor and monitor the impact of farming on soil and water quality. And we are also very happy and proud to work with more than 300 farmers covered in these catchments. And based on the results of our research, we also advise them how to increase their agricultural productivity while also protecting water quality and environment.
Yeah, in terms of water quality and the role of soil as a filter, I was looking at your experiment in the video there where you poured dirty water and it came out cleaner once it passed through some soil. Is that water drinkable then?
Well, that's a good question. I wouldn't drink that water from the glass. And for the reason, like, as we said, that soil is the largest natural filter on this planet. But like for that water you've seen in the experiment in the glass, it took only minutes for that water to filter through the soil and end up in the glass. In nature, it takes water years, sometimes even decades, depending on the soil and how deep those soils are, for that water to reach groundwater, for example. And so for that reason, I wouldn't drink the soil from the glasses. But yeah, I can explain to you more about how that water is purified on the way down through the soil. So the 3 main mechanisms that work and what cleans water in the soil is physical, chemical, and biological. So by physical, imagine that soil is like a big sieve, and all the soil pores capture larger particles in the water, and they get stuck in the pores and can't move further with the water. And then we have a chemical cleaning. So soil particles are electrically charged, and they act like millions of little magnets, which attract any chemical compounds in the water which have an opposite charge. For example, nutrients from fertilizers, heavy metals, pesticides, and other chemicals. That's very important. And also, soils, as Aoife and all other participants mentioned, soil is full of life, and particularly a wide variety of microorganisms which have the ability to decompose or transform both organic and inorganic substances which enter the soil. Imagine the oil spills on the soil, and even like it's harmful. There are some microorganisms who actually who can use that oil as a food for their metabolism, and then they transform the oil and decompose them into harmless substances like carbon dioxide and water as the end product. So basically, these 3 functions define how water is cleaned through the soil. And this process, as I mentioned, takes years, and it's not something which happens quickly.
Okay, I'm going to move on now to finally to James Rambo. James, good morning to you.
Morning, Damien. How are you?
What a great second name when you were growing up trying to impress everybody. Rambo.
That was my nickname, yeah.
I'm sure it was. And I'm sure you didn't mind it. Listen, I really enjoyed your input there into the video. And, you know, the big question now is we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Agriculture has to play its part. Methane emissions have to be reduced. And you know, the impact of agriculture on climate is huge in this country in particular. But at the same time, when we talk about sustainability, James, farmers say, well, you know, economic and social sustainability is quite important, as well as environmental sustainability. In other words, farmers are saying, yeah, we want to reduce the impact we're having on climate, but we also want to maintain our livelihoods. So I think you kind of touched on it there. How can we have both meeting? In other words, reduce emissions and using soil quality as an example of multi-species swards and so on and so forth, and better fertility and all of that. But Where will soil, I suppose, and pasture, what sort of a role will that play in helping farmers reduce emissions while also maintaining the output that they're currently enjoying?
Well, I mean, it's all going to depend on your soil quality. This has been we've battered the life out of that word soil quality throughout this video. And if you have a good quality soil, you are going to naturally bring your costs down, which is going to help you certainly maintain your livelihood. If you have a poorly managed and a poorly maintained soil, you're constantly having to fight it by putting inputs in. You're having to pay for extra fertilizers, for extra minerals to get the grass moving or your crops moving. If you have a soil that has good soil organic matter, rich in nutrients, pHs are at a good level, that soil itself, as it mineralizes, will release vast amounts of nitrogen that will buffer your inputs in growing your grass or your crop. You're going to end up with higher yields if you have a crop. If it's a grassland, higher yields as well, which is going to be able to feed more cows, which is going to feed more people in the long run. So again, we're just saying, if you have high yielding, good quality soils, you're going to be able to save in the long term on your inputs, which is going to benefit your pocket, obviously, and will enable you to sustain your own livelihood as well as the livelihoods of many others.
And is this something, James, that farmers are beginning to appreciate more now than they would have maybe a generation ago, or even 20 years ago?
Yeah, farming has shifted over time. So farmers back in the day, we'll say, would have been great carers of soil and their land. They depended heavily on it. This would have been, say, pre-fertilizer era, where they had to take the excrement, I suppose, from their animals and reapply it to really buffer the quality of their soils. There was a period then where fertilizers became a big thing. Everybody was hammering their ground to grow whatever they needed to, but they weren't replenishing the nutrients that were needed. Now, there's been the shift back now. People are realizing that it's costing so much, not both environmentally and financially, to have to keep trying to get these soils to be productive artificially, when you can just build up your soil quality again, and that will reduce your costs.
Right. Okay, listen, we have a few minutes left, and we've had a lot of questions, and as always, we run out of time. I get carried away maybe a little bit, but I don't know. I'm going to just throw out a question here from Lisa. How long does it take to improve organic matter in soil? So who wants to jump in and give me an answer on that? Anybody?
Yeah.
Yes, Louise. Yeah.
So yeah, it may take, is definitely depending on the soil. There is actually during the last few years a push from Europe, and especially from the French government, to impulse this program of 4 per meal, right? And this actually is indicating the rate in which we are encouraging our farmers to increase our soil organic matter. So 4% or 0.4% each year, right? So that would be a kind of a gross approximation of what our farmers could try to achieve with good management, right? In which you are applying soil organic, well, you are applying like residues from agriculture, for instance, or like farmyard manure, in which you are increasing the soil organic matter content of your soils, more or less at that rate, if you are lucky. Mm-hmm. So okay. That would be more or less a good indication, yeah.
Okay, we have a question here from Mark. Again, jump in, whoever wants to answer this one. How much better is rotationally grazing sheep than set stocking?
I'll take that one.
Good man, James.
So if you're rotationally grazing any animal, really, it increases your carbon sequestration potential, because you're constantly grazing the ground, but it also gives the ground time to regenerate. So grasslands shed their roots, several times in the year, And every time they do, those roots obviously decompose and over time end up becoming stable forms of carbon in the soil. So if you're set stocking, the grass never has time to rejuvenate because it's constantly being nipped. It doesn't have that time to rebuild itself between grazings. I mean, if you look at Africa, for example, you look at the Serengeti, you have these vast herds which pass by, who are in a sense rotationally grazing. They pass by, really scalp the land, but move on, allowing the land to regenerate itself behind. So yeah, definitely rotational grazing is better from a carbon sequestration point of view than set stocking. Yeah.
All right, James, and I'm going to chance this question for you as well, but if it's not for you, someone else might jump in. It comes in from Donna. What is the impact on earthworms from spreading slurry that has come from wormer-treated cattle, i.e. cattle that have received a worm drench?
That's a tough one. I'm not exactly qualified to answer it, but I don't think there are any negative effects because the wormers are targeted at endoparasites, which live within cattle. Earthworms aren't of that same group. So look, if there's anybody else that can enlighten the subject, please jump in, but I don't think it has any negative effect, cattle wormer, on earthworm populations, no.
All right. Anybody else on that?
Not to change to just go around, like in diverse grasslands, you can also insert some species that have anthelmintic effects, and so avoid the application of such products that they are not necessarily harming earthworms, but they are designed to harm some worms. So even if it's targeted to the pests of animals, it's still targeting some life, and then you can harm some other species down the road. But yeah, just grazing some specific plants like herbs, you can have the same effects without damage on the ecosystem.
Okay, and anybody else want to come in on that before I go to my final question? Okay, well, it's a final question I'm going to put to you all. So maybe just in 30 seconds. It's a question from Willie, and I think it's a good one to finish. He says, if you were to give farmers one single piece of advice that they can implement on their farms to improve soil health, what would it be? So I'll get your thoughts. Aoife, I'll go back to you first on that, if you don't mind. So, if farmers asking you, what can I do? I want to improve soil health for the environment and obviously to give me a better margin. What's the one key piece of advice you give them, Aoife Duff?
So I'm going to focus on the soil microbiome aspect. Basically, my advice would be to do what I said before and reduce your compaction, reduce soil erosion, reduce over-fertilizing, get your soils tested and see what they actually need so that you don't fertilize or you don't over-fertilize, you don't give the wrong fertilizer, that you put the right balance in. And if you can, increase diversity and plant diversity on your farm, because that will also promote soil microbiome diversity.
Okay, that's great. And your 30 seconds, Luis?
Yeah, so it would be depending on the soil. So I would probably say that farmer or that question to just first check what your soil is, which type of soil you have, and which type of problems you are experiencing, if so, and just to try to design which is the best strategy to help growing or enhancing your soil health. Here in Ireland, specifically, I would probably say try to reduce as much as possible compaction through going with less trafficking on top of the soils.
Okay.
If it's croplands, for instance, I would say increase as much as possible your soil organic matter content.
Okay, all right. And as you said, there's no one size fits all. It depends what part of the country you're in. The soil changes. Ghislaine?
Sorry. Basically, I won't fight with the others to say my solution is better, but A good way to keep the soil healthy and protected is actually just to keep it covered. And the most covered you keep it, the most protected it is. But then if you have one species only on your soil, then you have one type of roots and they sometimes don't go very deep. So go for biodiversity, because then you have different roots. They will take advantage of many different things. They'll improve the soil has the pore size, and they'll have deeper roots and sequester carbon. So just having different species, you get a full lot of diverse benefits that you will never get from one single species. So keep your soil covered and keep it covered by diverse species.
Diversity is the key there. Augie?
Well, I completely agree with all my colleagues. And what else can I add? They covered most of the things. So I would agree that maintaining soil cover would be very important, and to minimize the disturbance of soil, which is already mentioned. What I could add is, well, I would suggest that, especially the farmers, to always know their soils and to test them regularly, and check the fertility, know how to fertilize and when and how much, and according to the needs of the plants. So like us, plants have specific requirements at specific time, and if they're not hungry, they won't update those nutrients. And then that excess nutrients is both the economic loss to the farmer because it was applied, but it wasn't taken up by plants, and that excess fertilizer or something else can be lost to the environment.
Okay, all right. And finally to you, James.
Well, look, I obviously concur with all my colleagues, but I would have to say that balance is key. You know, if you look at yourself, if you were to just eat McDonald's all day long, you know, you wouldn't do too well on that. So definitely, as Aoife said, as Augie said, get your soils tested, make sure that you know your nutrient levels, your nutrient requirements, make sure you have all those balances correct so that the nutrients are available when they need to be available, and that, you know, you keep that good surface soil covered, there's no runoff. You know, balance is key.
Balance is key. And thanks for now making me want to go and get a Big Mac on my way home. All right, listen, guys, thanks so much for your time and great work you're doing down there. And we've really been very interested in everything that you've had to say. Thanks to all the panelists. And by the way, tomorrow, researchers at Johnstown Castle will be holding a science quiz on Zoom for local schools. Also during the week, scientists from Johnstown are going to be taking part in Zoom calls with the local schools in an Ask the Researcher initiative where students can ask them anything, basically. So teachers interested in arranging a speaker for their school should email us scienceweek@teagasc.ie, scienceweek@teagasc.ie if you want to get your students involved in that. Now, this event today and all week is being made possible and free to you all with the thanks to the to Teagasc and the Science Foundation of Ireland, who are the sponsors. We're back here again tomorrow. By the way, we'd love to hear back from you. Any feedback you have, you'll get an email. We'd love to get your response to how we've done here today and indeed during this week. Tomorrow, we are moving south from Wexford. We're heading southwest from there anyway to Moore Park, where the subject tomorrow will be sustainable farming, farm to fork, and we'll have a lively panel to answer your questions and talk about that. That's tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock. If you're not registered for it, do go to teagasc.ie and you can register and take part in that. And then, of course, Jonathan McRae will be here on Thursday and Friday with two more sessions to take us home to the end of the week on this Science Week. So from myself, Damien O'Reilly, until I talk to you at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, when we will be discussing sustainable farming, farm to fork from Moore Park. We'll chat to you then. Thank you very much and have a great day.